everybody. Welcome to another bonus episode of the Echo Leadership Podcast. Listen, go ahead and get something to take notes on because today, Andy Wood is interviewing Levi Lusko. Now, Levi is a pastor, a leader, a husband, a father, a speaker, and an author. Him and his wife started a church in Montana in 2007 that is now multiple locations across multiple states. This is going to be an incredible conversation for us to learn from. Now, I want to remind you that the first business day of every month, we release our regular episodes that are all geared around giving you practical ways to get better in your leadership. You can find out more information about all those episodes along with incredible guides to help you at echo.church/leadership podcast. That's echo.church/leadership podcast. Now, let's jump into this amazing conversation with Andy Wood and Levi Lusko.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of the Echo Leadership Podcast. I'm here with Levi Lusko. Levi, thanks so much for hanging out with us today and investing in our leaders.
Bro, thanks for having me. Such a joy.
Yeah, so you guys are full steam ahead there. I know you're working on a book currently and lots going on. I'd love to start off and kind of go back to the beginning and hear a little bit of your journey there at Fresh Life, how you guys got started, kind of how you sense that calling to start a church in Montana.
For sure. Yeah. My wife and I, we met in youth ministry. Well, she was an intern. I was an assistant to the youth pastor, which we just fell in love with serving together and watching God work through us together in the youth group, in every subsequent endeavor. And we always kind of had it in the back of our heads that one day we were going to plant a church. We didn't really know where or when, but we kind of were confident that God would make known to us when it was the right season. And I had since then taken a job as a teaching pastor at a church in California. And we were serving there in, the amazing state that you live in, and lots of people, which made sense for us because we've always felt a call to fulfill the Great Commission, reach a lot of people. And pragmatically, living in a concentrated area like Orange County made sense because of the large vision of reach lots of people before you die that I know reverberates through your heart as well. That's why you guys fight to expand the church in the Bay Area and keep reaching new people through platforms like this. And that was how we felt. So it didn't really make sense when God first began to put on our hearts to move to Montana and plant a church in a small city, because how do you reach the world in a small city? It doesn't work that way. You reach culture by hitting a big area, like Paul. He was strategic. Athens, Corinth, Ephesus. You don't go to Podunk, and start a church, and then hopefully that's going to reach the bigger areas. But all I can say is that the wisdom of man is, better than the wisdom of God is better than the foolishness of man, is my estimation of how at times God will call us to do things that don't make sense, because we undeniably felt a call to move to Kalispell, Montana, population 30,000 at the time, and start a church. And we felt that at the same time as feeling like we're supposed to reach a lot of people. And I just think God wanted to, prove that he doesn't have to do things the way that a sociologist would say, if you're going to do it strategically, this is how it's done. And, so anyhow, we started the church and 14 people came the first Sunday, and it slowly grew from there. But the irony of it all is we've watched God, work in a global way through a quote unquote backwoods place, like a Nazareth. I think God just loves to use the simple things that maybe man wouldn't select, and he chooses to use it. And that's been our journey and story. And there's not a week that goes by where we're not literally ministering around the world to countries and every state in the United States through a broadcast coming from a place that most people have never heard about.
It's incredible. And I know that you've branched out. So you have like multiple locations in multiple states. Talk a little bit about how you made that decision to like move beyond your local area after you guys got going.
It started out, Andy, out of necessity more than it was like a great big master plan. We just knew we wanted to reach people. We specifically felt like the constraints of our room we were in And we bumped up against a saturation in the area. Not that you've reached everybody for Christ in our valley. Obviously, people move in all the time, but at a certain point, when there's less than 100,000 people within driving range, either everyone's come, has a church, has been invited, or doesn't want to come. You know what I mean? So we just kind of felt like, okay, not like mission accomplished here, but we need to branch out to other areas. And so we started opening up other locations and seeing God bless those. And then of course, with online ministry and the ability to go on television and broadcast sermons, we just felt like the heartbeat of Jesus, which would always be, to other villages I must go. And everybody would want to keep him there. Stay at Capernaum, stay here, stay here. And he would always say, to other villages I must go. And I think we kind of had that sense of like, we reach an area and establish a presence, but God wants us to always have that heart for growth and, other tribes, other nations, other places.
It's awesome. With your locations, how much of that is you sending people to those places versus people from those areas hearing about you, listening to your teaching, and then saying, hey, I want to start a location in this area?
We've done it both ways. We've had some that we did not start, that people just started like inviting their friends over. And, one in specifically Polson, Montana, we didn't have it on our radar, but people started coming and inviting their friends. And then they eventually outgrew a home, rented a facility, outgrew that, rented a little convention conference center area to a hotel. And then, eventually it was almost like, okay, we get the memo, God, you're doing something there. So we sent some staffing and, rented a permanent place for that to meet. And that became a location. But that is probably the exception. Most oftentimes it's been something where we've, highlighted area like Salt Lake City, Utah. We feel God. I was in a shower, not to be too graphic, but God just gripped me with a sense of compassion for Salt Lake City, Utah. And so we put it before the church, and everyone rallied and gave towards it. And then we sent a staff member and a team, and we put it before the church again. Every time we would say, hey, if you feel called to move and get a job, live in the city, raise your kids in that city, we're going to open this church up by God's grace next year. And so we've kind of done it both and then we've also, done it where we did more of like interest meetings or worship nights and kind of just started gauging the interest. We do look at where we have clusters of maybe watch parties or people in a large number of cases giving from across a city that we don't have a church in. So we've kind of done it every which way.
So when you look at like your involvement with that, are you more of a starter or more of a builder? Like which of that is more natural, and what are you drawn to?
It's interesting. I think my involvement, that's a good question. I do have at my worst moments severe ADD where I get very excited about something and then eventually do lose interest. But I also am like, I really there's building instincts within me too. And I think I've had to cultivate that more and not have the trailing off of passion off of something. I would say there definitely is the entrepreneurial drive, but I'm also a really loyal person. So to a fault can even like, no, we're going to stay with this because, this at one point was the thing. But my involvement personally has also so changed, because when we first started doing locations, and this is 12 years ago, I would have been like on a Sunday morning feeling like I need to mix up which one I'm going to. For a while we kind of played this shell game, which like we never announced which location I was at, and I would get up early and drive and be at one, be at the other. Even we had to like charter like Cessna planes to fly to the cities that didn't have direct flights to them. And I realized that my presence in person actually mattered less than I thought. That was not like a big win, because then the next week everyone's like, well, when are you coming back? And so it was almost like it didn't actually help. And so we sort of just kind of had to be confident enough and comfortable in my own skin enough to say, hey, I'm going to be at one location. It's going to be on video. If you can't handle that, this probably isn't the church for you. And so I think that was, some of those, I burned the candle at both ends and the middle a little bit, trying to learn a hard lesson there.
That's really good. Yeah, I think part of the challenge with that too is it's confusing, right? So people, their expectations are always messed with. But when it's clear, okay, this is live, this is video, and that's what you're going to get, you build from there.
And it
So
really does empower the local leadership too, that they're not like secondary to me coming in, like that's somehow some big epic win. It just really, then I'm able to honor and validate the local leadership more, I think.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that we've noticed is people who they're watching the message on video every week, they're used to that. And then when you pop in one time and you're live, now all of a sudden they have to go through the process again to think, oh, well, this is what it's like live. This is what it's like on video. And it's good. I'd love for you to talk about, so you're a little over 15 or 14 years in. Talk about your journey as a leader and like key inflection points or moments that really shaped who you are and how you lead now.
Yeah, that's a great question. Man, there have been such hard lessons learned along the way, realizing what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, where I help, where I hurt, where I add too much value. I think the biggest lesson I would say in a sweeping statement has been learning not to commit the sin of adding too much value, of helping too much, of having great ideas, of always being needing to be the one that speaks into something. If you answer every question as a key leader and you always have the great idea, it really does cause people to dull what the quotient of the ideas they're bringing forward, because every time, you're going to get in and do it. So why should they even bother? And I think it really will drive away the best and the brightest who want to lead and want to run, but need to be empowered to do that. So realizing like, hey, my core competencies lie within ideation, vision, communication, and culture. And so really kind of steering that from 30,000 feet and then empowering the people that, and then giving them the authority as well to make their calls, so it's looked different ways over the years, but now I have a creative lead team and then an organizational lead team, and the creative lead team is composed of 4 individuals, and the organizational lead team is composed of 3 individuals. And those 2 groups I meet with once a week. And then obviously my own office staff I meet with from a life scheduling perspective. But those are the only 2 meetings I'm in every single week. And now, where I was before maybe checking in with them a lot and they were bringing up now it's just, they're keeping me up to date on what they're doing. And if they have a specific thing they really want my voice in or to pay attention to, other than that, they're really empowered to run the church and to lead and to make decisions. And, that's been today where we're at.
Are you meeting with those groups separately or all together?
Separately. Yeah. Cause it's kind of a little bit different of, what needs to be. And of course they're involved with each other and they're doing that. But what I used to end up doing was when it was all together, so much of the creative side of things, which I tend to care more about that. Obviously I have a background in graphic design personally. So I love the art. I love that stuff. So I spend a lot more time in that than I need my CFO and my, operations pastor and global online pastor to really weigh in on. And then, and vice versa, so that gives me life. I love meeting with our art director. I love meeting and talking art and whether it's a campaign or social media or marketing thing like that, to me is my happy place. And the other side of it is the necessary staffing, HR, keeping real estate and, construction stuff. And, as far as the scaling of, campus structure and upgrade cycles and all that stuff that to me is necessary. Of course it's necessary, but not really where I want my artist sitting in on that either,
That's good. How many staff do you guys have at this point?
Right now we have 45 staff and then 4 residents that are on staff at the church. Yeah.
How do you guys do multi-state connection with your meetings and Do you do all staff like once a month, or what are you guys doing for that?
Every single week, there's a 15-minute Zoom call with every single person. The title of that meeting is Rage in a Cage. Thank you, Smashing Pumpkins. And we changed the format, changed exactly what's communicated there, but it's always some vision. It's always a story of something to celebrate. It might be having a few of them. Everyone maybe got assigned. I think this week it was everyone got assigned to listen to a particular podcast. It might have been a Harvard Business Review podcast or some episode of something they were listening to. And then we would assign 3 or 4 people on the team to spend 10 minutes. And they, as a panel, are extrapolating on the value of that content from our organizational perspective. And everyone else is just listening. And then in the chat, chiming in on stuff they got out of it and liked it. We found that's helpful. We've done book discussion groups. We've done lots of different things. I've done it where I preach an hour every month on a value or cultural item. I mean, I've gone back through our core mission values and done whole long, sermons on them and presented more like a polished leadership message. We've done Q&A stuff, and we've just done it every which way. And right now we felt like everyone's really good. We've heard it. We've been sharpened. Now people really just need to run. And so pulling everyone in every single week for a long, address isn't really at the moment. We're trying to keep our heartbeat on that too. And I'm trusting our lead team's instincts. I'm like, hey, let me know when you feel like it's a time when we need to come back in on, maybe a different format. But one thing we've really tried to do is not be a meeting heavy culture unnecessarily and tie people's time up.
That's good. Yeah. So would you say that the primary purpose of that meeting then is like vision and culture?
Yeah, but it also can be housekeeping. I think that they've kept their options open on, what needs to be communicated. Absolutely vision and culture and celebration. It's a great chance when you have everyone together to honor and recognize somebody, for hey, this was a win this week from our, student director. This was an amazing thing that was done through our family life team. And this campaign was and so I think that's a real important thing too, getting everyone together just to honor someone, tell a story, keep everyone excited. Yeah. You can't ever, if you ever get anyone together and talk about the what of the organization without there being some tie in back to the why, you're beginning to erode the vision, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that kind of switching directions that strikes me about you and Jenny is it seems like from what I can tell, you guys have prioritized your health, like with your marriage, your family, and knowing that like this season for a lot of leaders has just taken them through the ringer. I'd love to hear you unpack, like, what are some key things that you're saying to yourself right now, or maybe some habits that you guys have put in place that are really helping you stay grounded, stay healthy, and stay focused on the mission?
Gosh, that's the question, isn't it? Yeah, we like everybody in the country and the world have seen the whites of our eyes, like, oh, wow, this is my limits, and they are real and they exist. And we found them, but for Jenny and I, one thing that's really, well, I'll just kind of buckshot. I meet with a counselor. It was every week for a long time. Right now I just switched to every other week. And that's just me personally. I can talk about organizational stuff as a psychologist, that I can talk through leadership, this issue, that issue, kids, parent, family, whatever, anything. And that's very helpful. I've also done a week-long intensive where it was more in depth to really do kind of like on an engine, you would have a 100,000-mile overhaul. And that was that week long of 3 hours a day. Counseling was kind of to deal with, that was last winter, to deal with some things that kept coming up. And so, okay, let's really work this stuff out. That was very helpful. My wife and I also see a marriage counselor as needed. It's there's been seasons where it's been more regular. Now we're on kind of we're at a good spot. And so it's more preventative maintenance that we would get together, I think, every couple months. My wife also sees a different counselor, and we found it kind of helps for us to have someone we're in together, someone she's talking to, someone I'm talking to. That's been our rhythm. Weekly date nights, weekly Sabbath, incredibly important. Periodic getaways with just the two of us, at least quarterly. And then I did this summer 6 weeks, no preaching. I've always done 4 to 6, but this time, for the first time during that time off of the pulpit, I also pulled away from the organization. I wasn't being sent giving data, attendance data, staffing stuff. I didn't, unless someone was, the instructions were, unless someone's in the hospital or dead, I can find out about it in August. And so, for the month of July, I literally did not know the state of the union. And again, that was a message to our team on their level of empowerment. There is no approval. There is no sense of, can I, so everyone's making calls, and we've been really intentional coming back to not, to use that as a reassessment of what our value is in the organization and what it isn't. And so those are some of the things that have helped me. In addition to that, I would add in physical health. Right now I've been on it for a minute, intermittent fasting, which over the years has been incredibly helpful to me for super productive mornings, because when my body's not digesting food, my mind operates on a much better level than when it's not. And then I love thermal cycling, ice bath, hot sauna, and going back and forth. That's been something that's really helped me with psychological toughness overall.
That's good. Talk about the day-to-day flow of keeping yourself mentally tough. Like, what are some things that you say to yourself?
Okay, very good. Well, I try and just I wouldn't say there's necessarily day-to-day certain things I would say to myself every day. I always have the same 6 or 7 statements I always say to myself before I preach, which is, when I'm weak, he is strong. The weaker I am, the stronger he becomes. And I always ask that God would help me to preach with clarity, conviction, compassion, and that I would preach like it was the first time I ever communicated and the last time. And then that I would always say to myself, I'm the son of the King. I'm filled with the Spirit that raised Christ Jesus from the dead. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, and I am as bold as a lion. And those things I would say to myself every time I've ever preached. But daily, I think it's more for me about listening, stillness. I always light my fire outside, always write in my journal, always try and take a moment to either say the Lord's Prayer or, something like Psalm 23, some scripture to center myself, ground myself. Always try and lift my palms during my first part of my quiet time, the sense of open hands, open heart. So those are some daily rhythms for sure.
That's good. How would you compare the mental challenge as a leader for you the last 18 to 24 months compared to other seasons?
A Russian nesting doll of terror, where every single level you open, there's a new terrible level to open up inside. Or like if let's say you thought you were running a marathon and you were like, okay, God, I just got to get to the finish line marathon. I'm spent. I'm just dead. And then you get to the last finish line, and then someone hands you a bicycle and tells you it was actually a triathlon, and you had no idea, and you didn't even know how to ride a bicycle. And so now you're having to figure that out. And when you finish that, they're like, all right, time to swim. And you're like, I actually don't know how to swim. And then, and then you finish that and you get told it's a decathlon. That's pretty much how I felt.
Yeah, I can relate, man. Yeah. So, within that, you guys have made a lot of key decisions. Like you've continued to expand all that you guys are doing all over the country, like with these watch parties, and you've stayed focused on the mission. And I'd love to hear some of that. Like, what are some of the things that you guys did through COVID, through the season with your church, that kind of continued to expand the mission?
Well, that's very gracious. There's also things that aren't going well too. I want to say that realistically for every leader listening. We have 2 campuses we still haven't opened. We have, so there's parts of our organization that have pruned back, and we've had to, our staffing going into COVID was 70 something, so we've definitely pared back the organization in some ways. So our investment of energy is smarter. We have a lean staff, a hungry staff. Some of those were good things. There's some blessed subtractions, others of them were just, we had to shift things away. I think we all have to be responsible, budget at a level that we're comfortable with, and be wise too. So there's plenty of things that were pivots that weren't just like, well, this is so amazing, and money's just raining from the sky and people are just lined up to, you know what I mean? So there's there's
Hmm.
plenty of heartache in the midst of it all. So I think it's easy. It's always easy to kind of have a perspective on things from the outside. And to every leader listening, like there's so much about Fresh Life that's not great. There's so much about it that keeps me up at night, and that would, that is causing us to have healthy prayer lives too, and God's blessing certain things. And we're trying to lean into that and optimize that. And I'm putting more of my energy into, than ever into our interns and college students and our residences. I'm almost 40. I'm asking myself the question, you know, who is going to reach my grandkids? And it's not, and the answer to that question isn't just me preaching great sermons. That's where I'm tempted to put all my energy, but to focus on raising up leaders, giving reps to, younger leaders, developing a deeper bench, having a mind towards the kingdom. I think we're all crazy if we're not starting to think about those sorts of things. What does the kingdom of God look like 100 years after I'm dead? And what am I doing today that's actually going to move that ball forward?
Hmm. That's good. So if you take like your physical gatherings at this point, where are you guys comparison to pre-COVID, like percentage wise,
I
roughly?
think 60 to 65%, although we always have a tremendously bad August, always, because
Hmm.
it's the last hurrah for summer. Montana is this like Narnia like environment. Everyone wants to be out getting their last couple camping trips in. So I know a lot of times, are you guys back in school already?
We are, yeah.
Yeah. So at the time of the preaching of this message, not all of our school systems are even fully back on yet. So I mean, until Labor Day, it's really, a crapshoot on that, and that's fine. I mean, we've leaned into that over the years. We've always like said, hey, look, if you're giving online, catching the podcast, amazing. That I think
Hmm.
having a summer in a camping, situation with your kids is, you're going to not regret that. So
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we start a little bit earlier here. We get rolling mid-August, so our rhythm, people are kind of getting back into it early August, and so it's interesting just to hear. I think everybody across the country is dealing with that reality. What's fascinating is in the church situation, a lot of the people that are coming back are just a bunch of new people.
oh,
So we
for
have
sure.
like just as many new. Yeah, it's crazy. So okay, let me ask you one more question
And
in terms
transplants,
of.
people are playing musical chairs around the country too. So, like
Yeah.
the new people we're getting from in Montana churches aren't necessarily from Montana. They're from Dallas or LA or Alabama, and they just wanted to relocate in the midst of COVID.
Yeah. The other transplant thing that I think is interesting, I was talking to our staff about this morning. I think that COVID gave people the excuse to go to the church that they really wanted to go to.
Sure.
And there are a lot of people that maybe they got connected at a church and they formed relationships and they got involved and they were there, but it wasn't the right vision for them. And I've just been saying to our staff, like a lot of people in our community, they may transition churches, and that's a good thing, because there is no accountability, physically in many ways for 12 months for us. So it's a new reality. You're starting with a different group of people.
That, and then asking the question, what does it look like to have someone who lives in Kansas but considers themselves a part of your church, and you're their pastor, and they're giving towards the vision, and so what does discipleship and formation look like? How do you best serve them to empower, them to win people for Christ in their city? It's strange. I mean, these were all things by God's grace. I mean, I started doing pre-recorded sermons that I would play on Sunday in 2009. It's the first time I went into a studio environment and preached a sermon for the Sunday morning coming up, and then would not be there physically that Sunday. So, I mean, this was, I'm so grateful for the way that literally I had 10, 11 years of that already being normative for our church. So that was definitely one advantage that we felt going into it. Those were not muscles that we needed to develop.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really good, man. Well, I'm encouraged by your faithfulness. Your teaching and your preaching always challenges me to focus on Jesus and what's most important. And your faithfulness, your continued tenacity for the mission that Jesus gave to our lives to share good news with the whole world is evident in you and Jenny both. I can see a sincerity in both of you that comes across, and it's very clear that what you're doing is flowing from this place in your life where it's authentic. And so I'm grateful for you, man. I'm grateful for your authentic leadership, your passion for people, your love for Jesus, and you inspire me.
Man, thank you. Well, right back to you guys, man. The way you and your wife are leading in your home and your church is fantastic. And just the story that you guys writing and rewriting and the power of adoption, and it's just an incredible thing. So I'm glad we're connected.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for investing in our leadership community today. It's been super helpful, and we're grateful for you.
Man, thanks a lot.
Man, I love this conversation, and I hope that it encouraged you and you're walking away with some things you can apply in your leadership this week. Again, if you want to find out more about the resources that Levi has available, you can find those at levilusko.com. That's levilusko.com. And we look forward to having you join with us for future episode releases right here on the first business day of the month. You can find out more information at echo.church/leadership podcast. And you know, it means a ton to us if you would like, share, and subscribe if this was helpful to you, because we want to be about helping leaders get better each and every week. So we'll see you soon on a future episode.